What if your entire future, a $50 million deal that could change your life forever, depended on a single conversation? Now what if the man you had to convince, a legendary Japanese millionaire, refused to speak a word of English? This was the nightmare unfolding for tech CEO Carter Harrison in the most exclusive restaurant in the city. His team was failing, his translator was useless, and his dream was turning to dust before his eyes. The tension in the private dining room was thick enough to cut with a steak knife. But the solution wasn't in a boardroom or a briefing document. It was standing silently in the corner, holding a water pitcher, the waitress. The air in the solstice room at Aurelia was not merely conditioned, it was curated. It carried the faint, expensive scents of aged leather from the high-backed chairs, a whisper of truffle oil from the kitchens, and the sharp metallic tang of desperation. At the head of the long mahogany table, Carter Harrison radiated a confidence so bright it was almost blinding. He wore a custom-tailored Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than the first car of anyone else in the room, save one. His smile was a brilliant, predatory slash of white, and he used it like a weapon. "Relax, team," he said, his voice a smooth baritone that had charmed venture capitalists up and down Sand Hill Road. "Tonight is a formality. Tanaka-san flew 12 hours to be here. He's already sold. We just need to pour the wine smile and not say anything stupid." He looked pointedly at Owen, the junior marketing lead, who gulped and straightened his tie. Seated to Carter's right, Isabella Rossi felt a familiar knot tighten in her stomach. As chief operating officer and the true architect of their company's groundbreaking AI platform, the Kairos engine. She knew tonight was anything but a formality. She had spent the last 3 weeks in a frantic state of due diligence, exchanging encrypted files with Mr. Kenji Tanaka's notoriously meticulous team in Tokyo. He wasn't just any investor. He was a legend, a titan of industry, who had built his empire on a foundation of honor and long-term vision. He didn't invest in flashy presentations. He invested in foundations. He was offering $50 million a sum that would not just launch their company, Nexus AI, into the stratosphere, but validate the years Isabella had poured into its creation. Carter, his team's questions were incredibly specific, Isabella murmured, keeping her voice low. Especially about the algorithm's core logic and the ethical frameworks. We need to be prepared for a deep dive. Carter waved a dismissive hand, the platinum gleam of his watch catching the low light. "Izzy, that's just Japanese thoroughness. They test the tires before they buy the car. He's an old-world guy. He just wants to look me in the eye, shake my hand, and know the man he's betting on." The man he's betting on? The phrase made Isabella's skin crawl. Carter was the face, the salesman. She was the substance. It was a partnership that had worked, but lately the cracks were beginning to show. Carter's promises were growing ever grander, his relationship with the absolute truth ever more flexible. Observing them all from the periphery of the opulent room was Anya Petrova. To the powerful people at the table, she was less a person and more a function of the room, like the dimmable lighting or the polished silverware. In her crisp black uniform, she moved with an economy of motion born of years of practice, refilling water glasses with a silent grace that made her almost invisible. But Anya saw everything. She saw the nervous tremor in Owen's hand as he reached for his bread roll. She saw the deep, weary lines around Isabella's eyes, a stark contrast to her perfectly composed expression. And she saw the brittle, hollow sheen of Carter Harrison's confidence. She'd served enough men like him to recognize the species. They mistook arrogance for strength and volume for value. Anya's life was a world away from theirs. She wasn't climbing the corporate ladder. She was trying to keep from sliding off it. Every paycheck from Aurelia went towards the mountain of medical debt her late mother had left behind. This job, with its demanding hours and invisible servitude, was a penance and a prison. It was a life she had accepted, a quiet fading into the background. She carried a secret, a part of herself she had locked away so tightly she sometimes forgot it was there. It was a ghost of a different life, a life where her mother, Yumi, was still alive, filling their small apartment with the lyrical sounds of her native tongue and stories of a grandfather in Kanazawa who could make wood sing. Anya was fluent in Japanese, a language she hadn't spoken with anyone but herself in the 5 years since her mother's passing. It was a key to a room in her heart she couldn't bear to open. A sharp click from the door announced the arrival of their guest. The Nexus AI team scrambled to their feet. Carter's smile widened, becoming an almost painful-looking rictus of welcome. Anya retreated to her station. Near the wall, her posture perfect her face, a mask of professional neutrality. She watched as Kenji Tanaka entered the room. He was not what she expected. There was no entourage, no flashy suit. He was a small, elderly man, dressed in a simple, perfectly tailored, dark grey suit. His hair was a neat cap of silver, and his face was a roadmap of dignified wrinkles. He didn't exude power in the loud Western way Carter did. His was a presence of immense gravity, a quiet, dense core around which the entire room seemed to bend. He was accompanied by a single younger man in a rumpled suit clutching a briefcase. "Tanaka-san, welcome, welcome," Carter boomed, striding forward with his hand outstretched. Mr. Tanaka stopped and offered a short, precise bow. He did not take Carter's hand. He spoke a few words in quiet, formal Japanese. Everyone turned to the rumpled young man, their hired translator, a graduate student named Leo. Leo blinked his face, paling slightly. He cleared his throat. He says, it is an honor to be here. He is pleased by the room." Even to Anya, who understood the words perfectly, the translation felt wrong. It was like describing a symphony by saying it was a collection of noises. Mr. Tanaka's words had been layered with nuance, a formal poetic greeting that spoke of the season, the journey, and the hope for a meeting of mutual understanding. Leo had translated the dictionary. He had missed the music entirely. Carter, oblivious, clapped his hands together. "Excellent. Let's sit. We have the finest wine, the best food. Let's celebrate our new partnership." Mr. Tanaka's eyes, dark and incredibly sharp, flickered around the table. They passed over Carter, Isabella, and the others. For a brief, unnerving moment, they met Anya's. She felt an unexpected jolt, a sense of being truly seen for the first time all night. Then his gaze moved on. He took his seat, his back ramrod straight, and a profound, impenetrable silence fell over the gilded cage. The dinner began not with a bang, but with the excruciating sound of silence, punctuated only by the clinking of cutlery on porcelain. Carter, never one to be deterred by a lack of response, launched into his well-rehearsed pitch, his voice echoing slightly in the tense quiet of the solstice room. "Nexus AI isn't just a company, Tanaka-san." He began, pausing for Leo to translate. "It's a paradigm shift. The Kairos engine is a revolutionary piece of tech that will redefine data processing. We're talking about real-time predictive analytics on a scale never before imagined." Leo, sweating under the pressure, stumbled through the translation. His Japanese was stilted academic. He relayed Carter's buzzwords, paradigm shift, revolutionary, synergy, with the pained expression of a man trying to explain quantum physics using only hand puppets. Mr. Tanaka listened without a change in expression. He took a delicate sip of his water, his movements precise and measured. When Leo finished, Mr. Tanaka responded with a question. It was longer this time, a flowing stream of elegant, complex Japanese. All eyes snapped back to Leo. The young translator's face went from pale to ghostly white. He stammered. He asks about the spirit of the engine. Carter let out a short, forced laugh. The spirit, I love that. Classic Japanese philosophy. Tell him the spirit is innovation, it's disruption, it's the spirit of Silicon Valley. But Anya, standing by the wall, felt a cold dread creep up her spine. That wasn't what Mr. Tanaka had asked. Her mind, almost against her will, had translated the question instantly. He had used the word kokoro, which meant heart or mind. But in this context it was closer to essence or core principle. He had also used a specific technical term, ronri kairo, meaning logical circuit. He had asked, what is the core principle of its logical circuit? Where does its true heart reside? It was a deeply technical question, disguised in philosophical language. He was testing their understanding of their own creation on a fundamental level. Leo's clumsy translation had turned a surgeon's scalpel into a child's crayon. Isabella, sensing the disconnect, tried to intervene. Leo, perhaps you could ask him to clarify. Is he asking about the base code? The architecture? Leo, flustered, tried to relay Isabella's question. The result was a linguistic car crash. He mixed up formal and informal tenses, used the wrong vocabulary, and ended up asking something that sounded like, "Do you want to know about the building where we keep the computers?" Mr. Tanaka's expression didn't change, but Anya saw a flicker of something in his eyes, not anger, but a deep, profound disappointment. It was the look of a master swordsmith who had been handed a blade made of tin. He gave a single curt nod and said nothing more. He picked up his chopsticks and began to eat his first course, a meticulously arranged plate of sashimi with serene focus. The conversation, for all intents and purposes, was over. The atmosphere became unbearable. Carter's confident smile began to twitch at the edges. He tried again, talking about market share, projected revenue, and user acquisition, his voice growing louder, as if to physically break through the wall of silence. Each time, Leo would offer a butchered condensed version, and Mr. Tanaka would simply nod his silence, a more damning indictment than any criticism. Isabella tried a different approach. She spoke slowly and clearly about the technology itself, avoiding jargon, hoping the concepts might transcend the language barrier. Mr. Tanaka listened, his gaze fixed on her, but without a proper channel, her words were just sounds, floating in the air, devoid of meaning. Anya felt like she was watching a play, where all the actors except for one had been given the wrong script. She could feel Isabella's mounting frustration, the sheer agony of having the most important conversation of her life hijacked by incompetence. She saw Carter's bravado curdling into panic. He was a performer without an audience, a salesman with nothing to sell. The main course arrived, a seared A5 Wagyu steak. Carter saw it as an opportunity. "Ah, Wagyu from your home country, the best in the world, Tanaka-san, a symbol of quality, just like Nexus AI." Leo translated this as, "He says the cow is from Japan." Mr. Tanaka picked up his steak knife. He didn't cut into the meat. Instead, he looked at it, his gaze intense. Then he spoke again, a short, quiet sentence, directed at no one in particular. Leo, now visibly trembling, said, He says it is beautiful." Anya had to bite the inside of her lip to keep from crying out. What Mr. Tanaka had actually said was a quote from an old Japanese proverb. "A single perfect cut reveals the soul of the blade." It wasn't about the steak. It was a metaphor. He was talking about clarity, precision, and purpose. He was telling them in his own indirect and elegant way that their presentation lacked a perfect cut. It was clumsy, dull, and revealed nothing of the soul of their enterprise. They weren't just failing to communicate. They were actively demonstrating their own lack of depth. Carter, completely missing the point, raised his wine glass. To beauty, then, and to our $50 million deal. The silence that followed that toast was the most profound of the night. It was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. The deal wasn't just dying, it was already dead and buried. The rest of the dinner would be a ghost, haunting the table. Isabella slumped slightly in her chair, a look of utter defeat finally washing over her face. Carter's smile was gone, replaced by a tight, angry line. Anya stood by the wall, her heart pounding. Her job was to be invisible, to refill glasses and clear plates. To interfere would be to break every rule of her employment. It would mean instant dismissal. It would mean inviting the chaos of the world back into her carefully controlled, quiet life. But watching Isabella's dream die, watching this monumental failure of understanding unfold, felt like a betrayal of something deeper. It felt like a betrayal of her mother's memory of the beautiful, precise language she had been taught to revere. The ghost of her mother's voice whispered in her ear, not in English, but in the language of their shared heart. She took a small, sharp breath. The decision was made. Stepping away from the wall, she broke the first rule. She became visible. Anya moved from the shadows of the wall into the muted light that pooled around the dining table. Each step felt both impossibly heavy and lighter than air. The hushed clinking of silverware stopped. All eyes turned to her first with confusion, then with irritation. Carter Harrison's face darkened with a look of pure fury. Who was this servant to interrupt his disastrous, high-stakes dinner? "What do you think you're doing?" He hissed, his voice a low, menacing growl. "Get back to the wall. We need more wine." Anya's heart hammered against her ribs, but she didn't look at Carter. She didn't look at the stunned faces of Isabella or Owen. She looked directly at Mr. Kenji Tanaka. She drew herself up to her full height, her posture no longer that of a deferential waitress, but of someone about to speak with purpose. She gave a slight, respectful bow from the waist, a gesture her mother had taught her was essential, one that conveyed respect without subservience. Then, in a clear, steady voice, she spoke. The words that came out were not the English of her daily life, but the Japanese of her heart. It was the formal, elegant Japanese she had spoken with her mother, imbued with a politeness and precision that Leo the translator could only dream of. Tanaka-sama, she began using the most respectful honorific. "Okotoba wo segiru shichure wo o yorushi kudasai. Shikashi, saki hodo no o kotoba no fukai imi ga tadashiku dawatte inai you ni omoemasu." The room fell into a state of suspended animation. The effect was instantaneous and electric. Leo the translator's jaw dropped his face, a mask of disbelief. Carter's angry scowl morphed into slack-jawed astonishment. Isabella's head snapped up her weary eyes, widening with a flicker of dawning hope. But the only reaction that mattered was Mr. Tanaka's. For the first time all evening, his placid, unreadable expression shifted. A spark of genuine surprise lit his dark eyes. He slowly placed his knife and fork down, aligning them perfectly on his plate. He turned his full attention to Anya, studying her, as if seeing her for the first time. The invisible waitress was suddenly the most visible person in the room. He replied in Japanese, his tone still quiet, but now laced with a sharp thread of curiosity. "You understand my words?" Anya bowed her head again slightly before answering. "Yes, sir." "You were not speaking of the stakes, beauty. You were speaking of precision, of how a single perfect action can reveal the true nature of the tool and of the person who wields it." She translated her own words into English for the benefit of the stunned table. He asked if I understood him. I confirmed that I did, and explained his metaphor about the blade. A wave of comprehension washed over Isabella's face. She looked at the useless translator, then back at Anya, a million questions in her eyes. Carter, recovering from his shock, saw not a solution, but a threat to his authority. "What is this? Who is she? What is she talking about?" he demanded, looking around the table as if someone else could explain the absurdity of the situation. Mr. Tanaka ignored him completely. He continued to speak to Anya in Japanese, his question more personal this time. It is rare to hear such a pure accent from someone not born and raised in Japan. "Who taught you?" Anya felt a pang in her chest, the familiar ache of a wound that never truly healed. "My mother, sir," she replied in Japanese, her voice softening almost imperceptibly. "She was from Kanazawa." Then she translated for the table. He asked who taught me the language. I told him it was my mother. At the mention of Kanazawa, a city known for its rich artistic heritage and master artisans, another flicker of interest crossed Mr. Tanaka's face. He seemed to be looking at her not just as a waitress, or even as a translator, but as a person with a history, a story. He gestured to the empty chair beside him, an invitation that was as shocking as it was unequivocal. "Please," he said, and for the first time that night, he spoke a single word in heavily accented but perfectly clear English. The word was not directed at the CEO who had been shouting at him for an hour, nor at the COO who held the company's secrets. It was directed at the waitress in the black uniform. "Sit." Carter looked as if he had been slapped. "Sit, she can't sit. She's the staff." But Anya barely heard him. The entire world had narrowed to the space between her and the old Japanese man at the table. His invitation was more than just a seat. It was a bridge across the chasm of silence that had defined the evening. It was an opportunity she never could have imagined, and a terrifying leap into the unknown. Isabella made the decision for her. "Anya," she said, her voice firm and clear, cutting through Carter's protests. "Please, sit down." With trembling legs, Anya pulled out the heavy leather chair and sat down at the table of power brokers and millionaires. She was still in her uniform, a stark symbol of her station, yet the dynamics of the room had been irrevocably altered. She was no longer a servant. She was the key. As Anya sat, the silence in the room was different. The earlier quiet had been a void, a heavy blanket of misunderstanding. This was a silence of profound reassessment of every person at the table, recalibrating their understanding of the universe. Carter Harrison stared at Anya with a mixture of rage and disbelief, his authority utterly usurped. Leo, the now redundant translator, looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Isabella, however, watched Anya with an expression of intense, hopeful focus. She saw not a waitress, but a lifeline. Mr. Tanaka regarded Anya for a long moment, his gaze sharp and appraising. Then he began to speak in Japanese again, not with a question, but with a statement. He spoke slowly, deliberately, his words weaving a short, elegant narrative. It was a classic Zen koan, a paradoxical story about a master and a student trying to draw a perfect circle. When he finished, he looked at Anya, waiting. This was a test far more complex than a simple translation of vocabulary. He was testing her understanding of culture, of philosophy, of the subtle layers of meaning that underpinned his entire worldview. Anya listened intently, her mind falling into the familiar rhythms of the language. The story was about the student who practiced for years using compasses and tools to achieve a geometrically perfect circle, yet the master was never satisfied. Finally, in a moment of frustration and abandon, the student took a brush and, with a single fluid breath, drew a freehand circle. It was imperfect wobbly, and yet the master declared it perfect. Anya took a breath. "Tanaka-sama tells a story." She began, her voice now more confident, as she translated for the table. About the difference between technical perfection and true essence. The perfect circle was not the one that was geometrically flawless, but the one that was drawn with spirit and intention. The one that was alive. She paused, searching for the right word. The one that had kokoro. She used the same word Mr. Tanaka had used earlier. The word Leo had translated as spirit. Now in context, its meaning was crystal clear. Isabella's eyes lit up with understanding. "He's not just talking about circles," she whispered, her gaze fixed on Anya. "No," Anya agreed. "He's talking about our company. He's asking if the Kairos engine is just a technically perfect machine, or if it has a soul." Carter scoffed, a desperate attempt to regain control. "A soul. It's a piece of code. It doesn't have a soul. It has a revolutionary processing speed that will corner the market. Tell him that. Tell him about the numbers." But Anya kept her focus on Mr. Tanaka, who had been watching the exchange intently. She addressed him again in Japanese. "Harrison-san believes the engine's value is in its technical superiority and market potential." Mr. Tanaka gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He had understood Carter's tone and intent without needing a translation. Then he asked Anya another question, his voice soft but insistent. Anya translated. "Tanaka-sama asks, 'But what do you think, Rossi-san?'" He had directed the question specifically at Isabella. Isabella was taken aback. For the entire evening she had been a secondary figure, overshadowed by Carter's booming sales pitch. Now the legendary investor was asking for her opinion through the unexpected conduit of their waitress. She leaned forward, her earlier exhaustion replaced by a passionate intensity. "Please, Anya, tell him this, exactly as I say it." She took a deep breath. "The Kairos engine, its soul is in its name. Kairos. It's an ancient Greek concept. It doesn't mean chronological time, it means the opportune moment, the perfect, critical moment to act. The code isn't just about processing data faster. It's about finding that one moment of clarity in a sea of noise. It's designed to identify the critical juncture where a decision can change everything. Its soul is the pursuit of that perfect moment." Anya translated Isabella's words, her voice flowing with the poetry and passion of the original statement. She found the perfect Japanese equivalents for the concept's words that spoke of insight, dusatsu, of critical moments, kikan, and of the profound connection between data and decisive action. As she spoke, Mr. Tanaka leaned forward slightly. The impassive mask was gone, replaced by an expression of deep intellectual engagement. He was no longer just listening. He was in a dialogue. When Anya finished, he fired back another question immediately. "He asks for an example," Anya translated, "a practical application that demonstrates this soul." Before Carter could jump in with a pre-packaged marketing story, Isabella answered. "The beta test we ran with the National Seismology Center," she said, her voice quick and precise. "Our engine analyzed 20 years of seismic data. Other programs could predict the probability of an earthquake in a given region. Kairos did something different. It identified the precise pattern of microtremors that preceded a specific landslide event in 2019, a pattern no one had ever seen. It found the Kairos moment, the critical window, where an evacuation order would have saved hundreds of lives. It's not just about prediction, it's about prevention." Anya relayed the story. This time, when she finished, Mr. Tanaka sat back in his chair. He looked from Isabella the creator to Anya, the conduit, and a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. It transformed him, softening the stern lines, and revealing a warmth that had been hidden all evening. "Subarashi," he said softly. "Wonderful." He then spoke at length a calm and thoughtful monologue. Anya listened no longer, a waitress but an integral part of the most important negotiation of Nexus AI's existence. "Mr. Tanaka says," she began, her voice a calm anchor in the electrified room, "that for decades Western companies have come to him with machines. Faster, bigger, more profitable machines. They speak of numbers and power. He says that very few have ever spoken to him of Kokoro. He believes that a creation without a soul, no matter how technically perfect, is ultimately hollow. It is a perfect circle drawn with a compass. It has no life." She paused, looking at Isabella. "He says you, Rossi-san, have drawn a circle with a free hand. The power in the room had not just shifted, it had found its rightful center. It flowed not from Carter's wealth-obsessed monologue, but from the triangle of understanding formed between the wise old investor, the brilliant female engineer, and the quiet, observant waitress who had become their voice. The lock of misunderstanding had been stubborn, but in Anya, they had finally found the perfect key. And with that key, she was beginning to unlock far more than just a business deal. With the philosophical groundwork laid, the conversation, guided by Mr. Tanaka and facilitated by Anya, pivoted with startling speed. The pleasantries were over. The true examination had begun. Mr. Tanaka's questions now became razor-sharp and deeply technical. He moved past the what of the Kairos engine and began probing the how. He asked about the foundational architecture, the data ingestion protocols, and the very nature of the learning algorithm at its core. He used precise, specific terminology that made it clear his knowledge was far from superficial. Carter Harrison, seeing the conversation shifting to territory where he was dangerously out of his depth, tried to wrest back control. "Okay, great, we all love the soul stuff," he said, with a dismissive wave. "But let's talk about scalability, Tanaka-san. Our growth potential is off the charts. We're projecting a 500% user base increase in the first 18 months. Anya dutifully translated Carter's interjection. Mr. Tanaka listened, nodded politely, and then completely ignored it. He turned his attention back to Isabella. His next question, relayed by Anya, cutting straight to the bone. He asks about the origin of the core heuristic algorithm. Anya said the technical term flowing naturally from her lips. Specifically the predictive pattern recognition module. He notes that its structure is highly unusual, almost organic. He wishes to know what inspired its design. Isabella lit up, thrilled to be discussing the real substance of her work. "It was inspired by biomimicry," she explained eagerly. "I based the foundational logic on the mycelial networks of fungi, the way a network can share information across a vast, decentralized system to respond to environmental changes. It's the most efficient data processor in nature. I spent years adapting that biological model into code." As Anya translated this, Mr. Tanaka's eyes narrowed in fascination. He murmured a quiet Japanese phrase. "What did he say?" Isabella asked. Anya hesitated for a fraction of a second. He said, "So its roots are in the earth." It was a statement of respect. Carter, however, saw his opening. "Exactly. All her idea. Isabella is a genius, a total rock star. I saw her potential from day one, which is why I brought her on and funded her initial research. A perfect partnership." He smiled his salesman smile, positioning himself as the visionary who had discovered the talent. A subtle tension entered the room. Anya, translating Carter's self-congratulatory statement, chose her words carefully, but the boastful tone was unmistakable. Mr. Tanaka's gaze shifted from Isabella to Carter, and his expression became coolly analytical once more. He posed his next question, and Anya could feel the change in its nature. It was no longer a question of curiosity, but of verification. Tanaka-sama asks for clarification on the timeline of the algorithm's development. Anya stated, her voice neutral. He is referencing a paper published by Stanford University 3 years ago, authored by a Dr. Alistair Finch, describing a theoretical model for mycelial-based neural networks. He notes the striking similarities and asks if your work was built upon Dr. Finch's theoretical framework. The air in the room suddenly grew thin. Isabella's face went rigid. Owen, the junior executive, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. This was the dark secret at the heart of Nexus AI, the one Isabella had fought with Carter about for months in late-night screaming arguments. "That's a very specific question," Isabella said, slowly choosing her words with extreme care. "Dr. Finch's paper was certainly influential in the field. Our work explores a similar conceptual space." Carter jumped in his voice, a little too loud, a little too jovial. "All great minds think alike, right? Look, in the tech world, everyone is building on everyone else's work. That's innovation. We just got to the finish line first. We operationalized the theory." He shot a hard, warning glance at Isabella. "Stay on script." But Mr. Tanaka was relentless. Through Anya, the next question came like a hammer blow. He is not asking about conceptual similarities. His team has analyzed the small code sample you provided in the prospectus. They found residual artifacts, commented out code fragments that bear an uncanny resemblance to a programming style used in Dr. Finch's publicly available research materials. He is asking very directly if you licensed Dr. Finch's foundational work, or if you simply took it. The room was now deathly silent. This wasn't an investment meeting anymore. It was an interrogation. Mr. Tanaka had not come to be sold. He had come to investigate. His meticulous team had already found the cracks in their facade. He was here in person to see if the people behind the company were as flawed as their code. Carter's face flushed a deep, ugly red. "That is an insulting accusation. Our code is proprietary. It's the result of thousands of hours of our own work. Tell him that," he snarled at Anya. Anya translated his angry denial, her voice devoid of emotion. But she looked at Isabella, whose face was a portrait of anguish. Anya could see the war raging within her, the loyalty to the company she had built versus the truth she knew in her heart. Isabella closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, she looked directly at Anya, bypassing Carter completely. Her voice was quiet, but clear. "Anya, please translate this for me, and only for me. Tell Tanaka-sama that the ethical framework of our company is as important to me as the code itself. Tell him I have always advocated for a partnership with Dr. Finch." Anya did. As she spoke, the Japanese words, Carter's head whipped around to face Isabella, his eyes blazing with betrayal. "What did you say? What the hell did you just say?" Before Anya could translate his outburst, Mr. Tanaka spoke, his voice calm, but carrying the chilling weight of a judge's verdict. Anya turned to the table. The role of translator had now become the role of executioner. "Mr. Tanaka says that a tree cannot grow strong and tall if its roots are stolen from another's garden. He says integrity, like a mycelial network, is invisible but essential. Without it, the entire structure will inevitably rot from within." Carter Harrison sprang to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "This is outrageous. This whole dinner has been a setup. We're done here." His panicked, guilty reaction was more damning than any confession. He had taken the bait. The facade had not just cracked, it had shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. Mr. Tanaka did not even flinch. He simply watched the enraged CEO, his ancient eyes filled not with anger, but with a quiet, sad confirmation of what he had suspected all along. As Carter Harrison stood fuming, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him, Mr. Tanaka's attention drifted away from the disgraced CEO. His gaze softened as it settled back on Anya. The intense forensic questioning had ceased, replaced by a quiet, contemplative air. He seemed to be looking at her not as a translator, but as if searching for a familiar pattern, a half-remembered melody. He spoke to her in Japanese, his tone gentle and introspective. It was no longer about business. Anya listened, a strange feeling prickling at the back of her neck. She translated for Isabella, her voice now much softer. He is thanking me. He says my mother must have been a remarkable woman to have taught the language with such purity of heart. Isabella, still reeling from the implosion of the deal, and her partnership just nodded her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and awe at the turn of events. Mr. Tanaka continued, asking another question. And your family name, you said it was Petrova. Yes, from my father, Anya replied in Japanese. And your mother's name, her family name. He pressed gently. Anya felt that familiar pang of grief, the one that came whenever she had to speak of the past. Her name was Yumi, she said, her voice catching slightly. Her family name was Sato. At the name Sato, Mr. Tanaka went completely still. A profound change came over his features. The wise investor, the stern interrogator, both personas fell away, revealing something far older, something deeply personal. A look of astonishment and reverence dawned on his face. Sato. He repeated the name softly in Japanese, as if it were a sacred word. From Kanazawa. Was your grandfather, by any chance, a man named Masaru Sato? Anya's blood ran cold. It felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. The name hung in the air, a name she had not heard spoken by anyone but her mother in over a decade. Masaru Sato, her grandfather, the master woodworker, the man who could supposedly make wood sing. Yes, she whispered the word barely audible. He was my grandfather. But how could you possibly know him? Mr. Tanaka leaned back in his chair, a slow, wondrous smile spreading across his face. He looked around the opulent dining room as if it were a distant, irrelevant dream. He began to speak, and Anya translated, her mind reeling as she processed the impossible story he was telling. 50 years ago. Anya's voice trembled as she spoke his words. When I was a young man, with no money, and only a desperate idea for a new type of electronic component, I went to every bank in Tokyo. They all laughed at me. They said I had no collateral, no history. I was about to give up. He paused, his eyes distant. I had one last meeting with a small local credit union in Kanazawa. The loan officer was a stern, traditional man. He told me he could not approve my loan. But as I was leaving, a quiet man who was there, depositing his own meager savings, stopped me. He had overheard my pitch. He was a simple woodworker. He looked at my schematics, which no one else understood. He couldn't read the technical language, but he traced the lines with his finger. Mr. Tanaka's eyes met Anya's, and in them she saw the ghost of a young, desperate man. This line, he told the loan officer. Mr. Tanaka continued, his voice thick with emotion. It has integrity. It is like a perfect joint in wood. Strong, honest. You should give this boy the money. The woodworker offered to stake his own workshop, his family's legacy, for 3 generations as collateral for my loan. That man's belief in the honesty of my design was the foundation of everything I have ever built. Anya's hand flew to her mouth. She could barely speak the final translation. That woodworker was my grandfather, Masaru Sato. The room was silent, save for the sound of Carter Harrison's harsh breathing. The $50 million business deal, the Kairos engine, the frantic posturing, all of it faded into insignificance. The true purpose of this dinner, the real reason Kenji Tanaka had flown across the world, was suddenly blindingly clear. I never got to repay him properly. Mr. Tanaka said, his voice now a low murmur of Japanese that Anya instinctively understood without needing to translate. He passed away before my company became a success. I have searched for his family for years, but his daughter, Yumi, your mother, she had moved to America and married. I could never find her. He looked at Anya, and the warmth in his eyes was overwhelming. I did not come here tonight just to invest in a company. I came here following a faint echo. The prospectus mentioned an algorithm based on natural organic systems. It reminded me of the way your grandfather spoke of the grain in a piece of wood. It was a foolish hope, a pilgrimage on the slimmest of chances. I came looking for a sign of that same spirit, that same integrity. I did not expect to find the man's own blood. Carter Harrison, finally grasping the monumental scope of his failure, made a choked sound and stumbled out of the room, defeated and disgraced. He was a ghost who no longer belonged in the story. The room was left with 3 people, an old man who had come seeking the spirit of his benefactor, a brilliant woman whose creation had unknowingly summoned him, and the quiet waitress, who was the living legacy of the very integrity he had been searching for. The dinner was over, but the real meeting had only just begun. The violent scrape of Carter Harrison's chair was the last ugly sound in the room. His retreat was not a quiet departure, but a messy evacuation, the sound of his panicked footsteps echoing down the hall before being swallowed by the restaurant's hushed ambiance. He left behind a vacuum, but it was not an empty one. The oppressive, crackling tension that had defined the evening, the static of lies and frantic posturing, was gone. In its place, a profound and restorative silence settled over the solstice room. It was a silence that felt clean, breathable, a space where honest thoughts could finally take root. The lingering aroma of expensive wine and seared wagyu now seemed less like a backdrop for a corporate execution, and more like the remnants of a feast whose true purpose had only just been revealed. Mr. Tanaka watched the empty doorway for a long moment, his expression not of triumph, but of a weary, resigned sadness. He had seen men like Carter Harrison before hollow trees with impressive foliage, destined to collapse in the first strong wind. He sighed a quiet exhalation of breath that seemed to disperse the last vestiges of the confrontation. Then he turned his full, undivided attention to Isabella. The shrewdness in his eyes, which had been so piercing during his interrogation, was now tempered with a look of immense respect, the look of a master craftsman acknowledging the work of a fellow artisan. He began to speak in Japanese, his voice calm and measured, imbued with the authority of someone who builds things to last. Anya, still seated at the table, found herself translating not as a mechanical conduit, but as an active participant in the creation of a new future. Rossi-san. Anya began her voice, gaining a new resonance in the quiet room. Mr. Tanaka would like to be very clear. A house with a rotten foundation cannot be saved by replastering the walls. He says that the structure of Nexus AI was built on a stolen root, and it was only a matter of time before the poison reached the leaves. Harrison-san's ambition was the rot. Isabella listened, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She had known this in her heart for months. Hearing it articulated so plainly by this man was both a condemnation of her past compromises and a profound validation of her deepest fears. She simply nodded, unable to speak, her eyes conveying the truth of his words. But Anya continued, a new warmth entering her tone as she channeled Mr. Tanaka's message. He says a brilliant design, a truly elegant and honest blueprint, is the rarest thing in this world. He speaks of your mycelial network concept. He says it is a design that understands that true strength is not in a single unyielding pillar, but in a vast, interconnected and honest network. This is a philosophy he has applied to his own businesses for half a century. He paused, and Mr. Tanaka looked directly at Isabella, a powerful, encouraging gaze that seemed to see past her exhaustion and straight into the core of her intellect. Therefore, Anya said, her voice building with the weight of the words, he wishes to make you a new offer. It is not an investment. An investment is passive. This is an offer of partnership. He wants to help you build a new company from the first line of code on a clean and solid foundation. With you as Chief Executive Officer, he will provide the $50 million not as an investor chasing a return, but as a founding partner dedicated to the vision. He wants to build a company worthy of the name Kairos, a company that embodies the principles your grandfather, Masaru Sato, lived by: integrity in the design, honesty in the execution. The scale of the offer was staggering. It wasn't just a lifeline, it was a complete rebirth. For a moment, Isabella felt a wave of vertigo. The path she had been on, the relentless stress, the moral erosion of working with Carter, it all washed away, leaving her standing on the edge of an immense, terrifying, and brilliant new reality. She thought of the endless nights, the arguments, the feeling of her soul being sanded down with every small lie she had to tolerate. All of it could be gone. "Tell him," Isabella began, her voice raspy with emotion, "that I don't know what to say. To be a CEO, that was never my plan." Anya translated, and Mr. Tanaka responded immediately, his voice gentle but firm. "He says a plan is a map for a known country," Anya relayed. "But true discovery happens when you have the courage to step into the unknown. He believes you are a discoverer, Rossi-san. He did not ask about your plan. He asked about your character." Tears welled in Isabella's eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief or of release. She took a deep, shuddering breath and straightened her back, a new resolve hardening her features. "Anya," she said, her voice now clear and strong, "please tell Tanaka-sama that it would be the greatest honor of my life to build that house with him. Tell him yes." Anya smiled as she delivered the acceptance. A silent, powerful understanding passed between the three of them. A company had just been born in the quiet ruins of another. Then the moment shifted. Mr. Tanaka turned his body slightly, giving his complete focus to Anya. The warmth in his eyes deepened into something profoundly personal, a look that spanned generations. He began to speak to her, not about business or foundations, but about family, about legacy. "He is making me an offer as well," Anya said, almost in a whisper, as she translated for Isabella's benefit, though the words were meant for her own heart. "He says that the greatest ventures are not built on code or capital, but on communication, on understanding. The bridge between cultures, between ideas, between a past of honorable tradition and a future of limitless technology. He says that bridge is the most critical infrastructure of all." Anya swallowed, her throat tight with emotion. "In your grandfather's honor, and in memory of your mother's spirit, he is establishing a new philanthropic entity, the Tanaka Sato Foundation. Its mission will be to find and fund the next generation of creators in technology, art, and business who demonstrate that their work has kokoro. It will sponsor exchanges, fund ethical research, and seek out those who build with integrity. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. He has asked me to lead its United States operations, to be the chief architect of that bridge. The world tilted on its axis. Just hours ago, Anya's reality had been the ache in her feet, the polite, empty smiles for wealthy patrons, and the gnawing, ever-present weight of the hospital bills that had consumed her mother's last years and her own present. Her fluency in Japanese had been a secret garden of grief, a place she visited only in memory. Now this man was offering her a chance to turn that secret into a public virtue, to transform her inheritance of sorrow into a legacy of purpose. He says I am uniquely qualified. Anya's voice trembled, not just because of my blood, but because of what I did tonight. He said I listened before I spoke. I sought to understand before I acted. I respected the nuances. I was the only person in the room who truly saw what was happening. Finally, Mr. Tanaka spoke of the last, most crushing detail of her life. And to ensure you can begin this work with a clean slate, with a soul unburdened by the ghosts of the past. Anya translated a single tear, finally breaking free and tracing a hot path down her cheek. He has instructed his family office in New York to settle the entirety of your mother's outstanding medical debts, in full, as of tomorrow morning. He says it is a small, laughably overdue repayment on a 50-year-old loan of faith. He says the Sato family's account is now paid. The words struck Anya with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't about the money. It was about the release. The mountain she had been climbing every single day, the one that defined her existence, had just vanished. It was freedom so sudden and absolute that it was disorienting. She was no longer a debtor, no longer just a waitress. She was Anya Petrova, the daughter of Yumi Sato, the granddaughter of Masaru Sato. And she was free. In the sacred quiet of the solstice room, two women forged in the crucible of that bizarre and disastrous dinner looked at each other. Isabella, the newly minted CEO, and Anya, the newly appointed foundation director. They were no longer separated by class or circumstance. They were partners, allies, their futures now woven together by a shared experience and the profound vision of the old man beside them. They stood to leave. As Anya walked past the serving station, where she had stood invisibly for hours, she felt the ghost of her former life slip away. They moved through the main dining room of Aurelia, a trio that defied easy explanation, the legendary Japanese tycoon, a woman in a power suit, radiant with new purpose, and a woman still in her waitress uniform, but who walked with the bearing of a diplomat. They stepped out of the gilded cage, not into the chaotic night, but into the clean, crisp air of a future they would now build together. That night, in a room built for power plays and empty promises, a real connection was forged. It wasn't about the $50 million. It was about the values that money can't buy: integrity, legacy, and the courage to speak the truth, even when it's your job to be silent. Anya's story is a powerful reminder that our hidden skills, the parts of our heritage we might have buried, can become our greatest strengths. Isabella's journey shows that talent without integrity is hollow, but when combined with honor, it can build empires. It proves that the most unexpected people can change our lives in the most profound ways. If this story of hidden talents and a legacy of honor resonated with you, please consider giving this video a like and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true life stories that uncover the extraordinary in the ordinary. Click that notification bell so you never miss a moment where one quiet voice changes everything.